So I recently did a video on my channel where I compared the consistency levels of a pure blade iron against a game improvement iron. Now on that particular test I did two 7-irons, and there's also a difference of loft between those two clubs. So many of you guys commented and you'd love to see the test of two irons, a blade and a game improvement iron of exactly the same loft. So that's what I've got in today's video. So I'm going to redo the test. I've got my Wilson Staff Model 6-iron, which comes in at 30 degrees of loft, and I'm going to put it up against the Mizuno JPX 919 hot metal. So Mizuno's most game improvement iron in a 7-iron, which is also 30 degrees of loft. So clearly a different number stamped on the bottom, but the idea here is the loft is exactly the same at 30 degrees. So we're going to redo that test and see if there's any difference of those consistency numbers. So we're going to start off with the Mizuno 919 JPX in the hot metal, so their most game improvement iron, as I mentioned. I've got the same shaft in both of these irons, same length, flex and lie is the same, so we've got this as equal as we can. Let's start off with the JPX. So I'm going to do the same sort of test as in the furthest distance from left to right in the dispersion of the 10 shots I'm going to hit with each iron. Also a front to back dispersion, from the shortest to the longest. The quickest to the slowest of ball speeds, obviously as maybe my strike changes through those shots, we're going to look at that as well. So a number of things we're going to take a look at in terms of how the consistency is between a blade iron, which doesn't have a lot of technology in, to something that has a lot under the bonnet. That's a nice opening shot there with the JPX. Very high ball flight, very harsh sort of feel to that. We know this isn't forged, so we're going to get some louder acoustics. Won't feel as good as obviously a forged iron, but that hit the green quite nicely to start off with. So I'm not going to show you all ball flights for every single shot of these 10, but we'll flick through these, then we'll move into that blade. That's a nice strike to finish on there with the JPX hot metal. Okay, so there's 10 shots hit. We know what we're going to expect with that in terms of a look and a feel. It's bulky, it's a thick top edge, it's more confident inspiring. Obviously there's a lot of forgiveness in the back of that head. It sounds a little bit loud, it feels a little bit harder because it's not forged. So that we know those feels are going to be different compared to when I put that bladed forged iron in my hands. Dispersion wise there, a little bit, some couple of right, couple left in there. But overall, in and around that green quite nicely, but again, be interested to look at some others. Let's flick into the Wilson Staff 30 degree 6-iron. Same loft as I mentioned, forget the numbers on the bottom, it's the same loft is what we're more interested in here. We'll hit 10 shots with that. Okay, so Wilson Staff Model, pure blade, forged iron, no real technology in here at all. It's just a very slim slither of metal that's fully forged, so not a lot under the bonnet really that you can do in a blade iron. That's the same with most brands. Obviously 6-iron here, which again we're not too interested in the number on the bottom, but the fact is it's a 30 degree loft, so the same as that Mizuno we've just hit. So again, we're going to hit 10 shots of this, and what we saw in my previous video, albeit there was a difference of loft by, I think it was about 6 degrees off the top of my head. Obviously the more lofted iron, you would say, well, would be a little bit more forgiving because there's more loft there. So that's hence why you guys have probably commented on that, and hence why I'm doing this video for you, just to take that element out of it. It's very difficult to try and get the same brand game improvement iron to a blade. I just physically couldn't get the lofts the same in the same brand that I have availability for me here at the Academy, so that's why I've had to use a Mizuno against the Wilson, but it doesn't really matter on the brand. Important thing is I've got the shafts the same, spec wise the same, it's just that game improvement head against this blade head. So let's get underway with this pure blade iron. Beautiful look behind the ball. This is my own Wilson Staff iron. I love these irons, really, really nice. This first one hit. Okay, so that's a little bit low in the face. It's flown very nicely, to be fair. Hitting the target accuracy wise, And that's probably the thing with the blade iron, you're going to feel those little imperfections of that strike than you probably would do with a game improvement iron. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think personally that's a good thing, because then I know where I've hit it on the club face, I'm getting that feedback. Sometimes you might not get that through that game improvement iron. Okay, let's hit 9 more shots and then we'll look forward to looking at some numbers. Okay, not a bad strike to finish on there with a Wilson staff iron. So big real difference, obviously, apart from the feel, they feel amazing. It's definitely saw a little bit of a lower ball flight there, a little bit more of a penetrating ball flight against the game improvement iron. Again, we know maybe CG locations are going to be slightly different from these irons as we pump more technology, more shifting of weight around that bulkier head, more than what they can obviously do in that slimmer slither of metal in the pure blade. But let's go look at some numbers a little bit more detail between those 10 shots with a game improvement iron and a blade of exactly the same loft of 30 degrees. Right, okay, so let's look at some numbers. So I'm not going to fit all this on one actual screen, so I have to do a bit of scrolling up and down here. But start with hot metal first. We've got the 10 shots there. We've got the row of averages you can see here. So ball speed 128.8, launch at 17.6, 5763 on the average spin, and a carry of 182. So let's go a little bit deeper. What we did in the previous test was go from the furthest extreme of the highest ball speed to the drop off of the lowest ball speed, and we know strike makes a difference there. So we are seeing a difference of 5.1 mile an hour of that ball speed. So we're going from that 123.7 there up to a 128.6, I think it is, or 128.8 there. So that gives us a 5.1 mile an hour difference from the fastest to the lowest ball speed. Then move on to that backspin. So again, from the lowest to the highest backspin, how consistent are we getting? We've got a 6.234 there, and we're dropping down to a 5.154. So that gives us a 1,080 difference in revolution spin. So that's quite a jump, isn't it? And again, we know strike's going to change that, but that's why I've hit more shots in this particular video in terms of hitting 10. Obviously, you could hit 20, 30, and maybe see some similar numbers differences. I would expect, to be honest. Moving into carry distance, so from the shortest to the longest. Again, this is quite important. You're wanting to hit a 7-iron, whatever distance you want that club to go that distance. So the front to back dispersion, I think, is always quite an important one to look at. And the difference we've got here is 13 yards from the longest to the shortest. So we've got that 188 there, dropping down to that 175. So quite a big dispersion from that front to back, probably literally like a full club difference there, just through that. Maybe a little bit of difference of that strike and that spin and that speed and everything like that. It's all accumulative to that number. Looking at the dispersion from left to right, and clearly this is probably a little bit more maybe the goal for delivering the club, but again, the type of iron, the offset possibly, maybe just can influence a lot of that, can't it? And the way it sort of looks behind the ball. So left to right dispersion from the furthest right shot to the furthest left shot is 33.2 yards, which is a lot, isn't it? You know, so I had a bit of a miss going 17.9 to the right, and my biggest miss was the 15.3 to the left. So bit of a wide sort of dispersion there. So moving into the Wilson staff iron, I'll scroll this down to the 10 shots here. So we're seeing a ball speed of 128, so a bit quicker with that. I did see a slightly lower launch. We can see that through 15.4 average against a 17.6. Again, we talked a little bit about CG before. That location would be slightly different in certain irons. Game improvement irons, they tend to put that really deep into that head. Obviously gets that ball launching a lot higher, so I've delivered probably a little bit more dynamic loft there. Ball pops up a little bit higher through that game improvement iron, and obviously that changes that spin number a little bit there. So I've just sort of delivered maybe a little bit more of a less loft with that bladed iron. CG being a little bit high just pulls that launch out that little bit lower, and obviously that makes a difference to that spin number. So doing the same sort of comparison, the quickest to the lowest ball speed. was actually 6.6 mile an hour, so it was a bigger difference in the blade than it was in the game improvement. Probably because when I miss my strike, we haven't got that backing of that forgiveness, that perimeter weighting that you're going to see in that cavity back. So that's possibly a reason as to why there's such a difference, maybe. So 130.1 dropping down to 123.5. Moving into the backspin. This was a lot tighter here, so we had a difference between the highest to the lowest spinning golf shot was 528, so literally like half of what we saw with a hot metal. So we had a 5.616 there, dropping down to a 5.088, so much tighter on that backspin number, which again you sort of typically would see that more with that bladed iron. Going over to the carry distance from the shortest to the longest was 10 yards. So we had a 190 down to a 180. Okay, so better in terms of that front to back dispersion than the game improvement iron. Left to right dispersion was also much better, so 11.8 yards from the furthest to the right to the furthest to the left. I'd take that all day long for me. So I had a 3.6 right and only an 8.2 left for me, which for me is pretty good. So the blade wins on that front also. Right, okay guys, so there we go. There's that same lofted blade, pure blade against that ultimate game improvement iron. So clearly there the blade's winning, just that bigger difference of that ball speed, but probably your argument there is you've got that less forgiveness. So as you just move your strike fractionally around the blade iron, you're obviously going to get punished a little bit more than you would do with a cavity, with all that perimeter weighting, maybe different sort of materials that are in there. Sometimes you get tungsten, titanium in certain brands. Obviously we've got a bulkier, more stable probably head than we have in the blade, so that's probably going to give that support of that extra sort of ball speed on those real sort of miss hits. But apart from that, everything else much tighter. Dispersion, the spin, the front to back dispersion was much tighter with the blade iron also. I think it really goes down to you guys when you go out and look at that blade. I think that's a very desirable iron, isn't it? You look at that and think, oh, it's absolutely beautiful, I'd love to play that. Are you actually good enough in that strike pattern to cope with an iron like that? That's where you've got to go out and test it. Post comments down below, let me know your thoughts on that particular video. Hopefully that's sufficed the guys who wanted to see that Loft against Loft, consistency of a pure blade, less technology, forged head against that more game improvement, multi-material, non-forged head. Love to hear your thoughts as always, so post them down below. I'll try and reply to as many as I possibly can. If you enjoyed the content I'm putting out and you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. Hit that bell so as soon as a video lands on the channel, you're one of the very first ones to watch it. Follow up on my social media platforms, both Instagram and Twitter, and the handles there are @MNGolfCoach, and hopefully we'll catch up with you all very soon.